You send Bitcoin to someone else or to your own wallet, but do you understand the entire cascade of events that happens from the moment you press the send button and until the moment the balance arrives in the destination wallet? I'm Carol, co-founder of Area Bitcoin, and in this video I'll explain to you how a Bitcoin transaction works, how coins leave one address and go to another, network processing, and all the details you need to know. The first point to understand transaction on Bitcoin network is to know that your satoshis never leave the blockchain. When you send Bitcoin, you are actually giving a command to the network to move the balance from one address to another. This happens through encrypted digital signatures. Bitcoin works through public and private keys. Your Bitcoin or satoshis are linked to an address, a public key, and a private key. Your private key is an encrypted secret that allows you to move the balance. It's as if the blockchain address was the address of your home and the private key was the key you used to enter it. In other words, it's the address you provide to third parties to send you correspondence or mail, but the only way for you to enter your home is using your house key. You don't leave your house key lying around, and that's what grants access to anyone to your property. This is a great metaphor with Bitcoin. The private key is the secret that allows you to move your balance and that proves to Bitcoin protocol that you are the real owner of that address. Okay, let's suppose you want to send Bitcoin to someone else. You are going to send Bitcoin to me. You open your wallet, enter the amount you want to send, the address, and when you click send, the wallet will sign that transaction with your private key. In practice, you just press the send button, but in the code of the wallet, you are cryptographically signing the transaction. Along with the transaction, you are sending data that proves that you really are the owner of that address because you sign it with your private key. This is what happens on the device, on your cell phone or your hardware wallet or computer when you send a transaction. After you signed, the node connected to your wallet adds your transaction to the mempool, which is like a waiting room for transactions that wait until they are inserted into a block by miners. Transactions are recorded on the blockchain when a miner selects the transaction to be part of the information block. As soon as a miner inserts your transaction into a block, that block is checked by the network of nodes to see if the miner followed the network consensus and if it is a valid block. If everything is okay with the block, it is propagated across the network. All nodes add this new block to their copies of the blockchain they have. In other words, your transaction that was within that block becomes valid. It is at this moment that the first confirmation appears in the receipt address. In this case, me. When a transaction is inserted into a block, it is said to have been confirmed. As more blocks are mined, more confirmations happen. Generally, the transaction is considered irreversible after 6 confirmations, when 6 blocks have passed, which on average takes about 1 hour. Depending on the wallet configuration, it will release the balance for you to use after 1 or up to 6 confirmations, and you will receive notification that you have received a Bitcoin transaction, as shown in the last step of the image on the screen. As soon as the transaction is confirmed, I can see the available balance in my wallet and can move freely with my private key. So, thank you for the sats. This is basically the chain of events that happens on the Bitcoin network after a transaction is sent. Observe how nodes and miners participate in this process. Another important thing about transaction is that at layer 1, at layer blockchain, fees can vary greatly. Layer 1 is a settlement layer for sending larger amounts or amounts that will be stored more securely for the long term. For day-to-day payments, the ideal is to use the Lightning Network, layer 2 of the Bitcoin network, and which does not use blockchain processing for each transaction. Also, fees on the Lightning Network are much lower than on the Bitcoin blockchain. This happens because blockchain transactions take up space in the block. And as blocks are limited to a size of 4 megabytes, when the network has many transactions to be processed, not all of them can make into the block to be mined. And as blocks are limited to a size of 4 megabytes, when the network has many transactions to be processed, not all of them can make it into the next block to be mined. This means that the space in the block is scarce. It is important to check what the blockchain fees are before sending Bitcoin on-chain on the blockchain. Often in times of high demand for transactions processing, such as bull runs, fees can reach more than $100 per transaction. This is why the Lightning Network is ideal for smaller amounts and everyday payments. Here in this image on the right, you can see the size of all transactions that entered this block, the weight of the block, and the total total in fees. Each square there represents a transaction with different weights. Larger squares are heavier transactions and smaller ones are lighter transactions. Miners choose which transactions will enter the block according to who pays the most fees. Additionally, heavier transactions pay more because they take up more space. On days when many transactions take place and there is high demand to enter a block, fees tend to rise because there are more people wanting priority in their transactions. On days with less network demand, rates are lower. It's like riding an Uber. You must have taken an Uber at some point in your life, right? So imagine that you need an Uber in a sunny day and in the middle of the afternoon with no traffic, everything is calm. The Uber rate will be normal because there are a lot of Ubers in the city. There's plenty of Uber for everyone. There's plenty of space. Now, have you ever tried ordering an Uber on a chaotic rainy day during rush hour when leaving work around 6:30 the afternoon? What happens? There is no Uber available, you wait much longer for a ride to be confirmed, and the price rate for the run that is dynamic is much more expensive. So why does this happen? Because there is a lot of demand. Everyone wants to go home by car. With that rain, everyone wants an Uber at the same time. Sometimes there isn't an Uber for everyone. If before it would take 1 minute to order an Uber, now it takes more than half an hour and it is 5 times more expensive. This is what happens with Bitcoin mining fees, which are also dynamic. When the Bitcoin network is freer, people are not making many transactions, fees are more stable and lower. However, at times when there are thousands of people wanting to transact on Bitcoin at the same time and the mining difficulty is high, the network becomes slower and transaction fees become more expensive. Bitcoin network fees are measured in satoshis per vbyte. Satoshi is the smallest unit of measurement and vbyte stands for virtual byte, introduced by Bitcoin Segwit update, and measures the space that the transaction will occupy in the block. A normal Bitcoin transaction, a Segwit with one input and one output, averages about 140 vbytes. If a block is around 4 megabytes in weight and can hold around 1 million vbytes in transactions, this means that a block can carry around 7,000 Bitcoin transactions if they are the simplest ones. This is why when you enter block explorers like mempool.space, you will see the network fees being measured in satoshis per vbyte and the current priority levels. The fees also appear in dollars, but just to make life easier and have an idea of how much you are paying, the Bitcoin network prices everything in Bitcoin. So what makes a transaction heavier and more expensive in relation to other transactions? The answer is more data. The more data a transaction has, the heavier it becomes. The more space in the block it takes up, the more fees you have to pay to move those satoshis. That's why some types of transactions have more data and end up having more expensive fees when sending. Transactions with many UTXOs, many inputs and outputs, multisigs, Lightning channel opening transactions, and more complex scripts will pay more for space. Now this video is already huge to explain each of these points. If you want to learn more about all of this, subscribe here to the channel. Now that you understand how a transaction works, now you have to practice and observe this cascade of events for yourself. Then comment here what you thought and all of your doubts. Until next video, and opt out.